out with this group of kids that were around 18 years old. And they ended up at a bar in Houston, Texas. And being a cool dad, he thought it'd be kind of cool to buy his kid and a couple of his friends a couple of drinks at a restaurant called Beer Paredes. It was February 27th, 1993, a Saturday night, and just a few harmless drinks. Just a few harmless drinks. One cool dad, a bartender that obviously looked the other way, and invincible 18-year-old kids. 2 a.m. rolls around. It's the last call. And the whole group, by that point, is too drunk to know that they were too drunk to drive. Mark Weir was one of those boys. And Mark Weir, that night, made a very fateful choice. A stupid choice. But a choice that I wonder how many of us made at one point in our lives. Just a few miles away, my brother Mark, another Mark, had just left work. He worked at a restaurant, and he was headed home. Mark was an amazing guy. He's 26 at the time. Had a little girl, 5 years old, Sarah. He was funny, full of life, loved to dance, loved music. He was a big Grateful Dead fan, and used to go see the Dead play in places. He was in the restaurant business and had a dream of opening a restaurant one day called Terrapin Station. He was a writer. He was a aspiring screenwriter, and had a dream of writing a movie. My brother Michael was going to make that movie. Today, Michael has a film production company called Terrapin Pictures in his memory. I have my own company called Terrapin Solutions in his memory. We have a cabin up in the mountains called Terrapin Lodge. It's our family cabin in his memory, decorated with his stuff. We love it up there. But boy, we'd give it all away. We'd give it all back just to have Mark back. Just a few minutes after he leaves work, a few minutes later, he proceeds through a green light into an intersection. Later, an accident investigator would estimate that Mark Weir's car was traveling greater than 80 miles an hour. And he hit Mark right on his door. At 2:30 that morning, in the middle of the night, our phone rings. My mom wakes up, my wife and I. Andrew, Mark's been in a horrible accident. He's in surgery. You need to come over to the house. And so the family gathered, and we held each other and cried, and we prayed together. And a short time later, the phone rings again. And it's a doctor from Houston. I'm very sorry. We tried everything, but his injuries were too severe. You know, the grief that early morning, that early Sunday morning in our house, I'll never forget. It was gut-wrenching, palpable, uncontrollable, nightmarish. It was our whole family that was there, including my wife, Susie, who was dear friends with Mark and had a big brother relationship with Mark for many years. And we were all just torn up. We couldn't believe what was going on. My oldest brother, Mike, was in Los Angeles at the time, and he finds out the news on the phone. And later that morning, myself, my brother Daniel, and my dad meet Michael at the Oakland airport as he flew up to be with us. And coming off the plane, we met him at the gate when you could do that. And coming off the plane, my big brother Mike just collapsed into our arms. Daddy, Daddy, he's gone. We'd all fly to Houston together, just later that day, and I remember so much of that trip to Houston, because it's become so real, right? You deal with the car. We saw the car in an impound yard, and it was just unrecognizable. It was so destroyed. The funeral home, the arrangements, the decisions you have to make, stupid decisions like having to make a decision about a coffin, or about flowers, or about time of the ceremony or location, logistics, really. Cleaning out his apartment as a family. I remember the tears, certainly, but the tension, the occasional laughter as we remembered things together, the anger, lots of anger. And I remember Sarah, 5 years old, so sweet, such a beautiful little kid, and so uncomprehending. No idea what it meant that her daddy, who she loved so much, was now gone. I remember the funeral. I remember at the funeral, a local band in Houston that Mark loved so much came and played Bob Dylan, I Shall Be Released, at his funeral. We had a good friend of Mark's that the day of the funeral went to the corner of Shepherd and Westheimer where he was killed and sat on the corner there and made a tie-dye flag. And at the funeral we had that draped over Mark's coffin. And my brother Michael and I folded that flag up and presented it to my mom. I got home. My boss was actually a little peeved at me that I'd taken 5 days off. And I couldn't believe that at the time. But I wondered, how could he really know and understand? How could anybody really know and really understand what a family goes through in that situation? Life does go on. It's never the same, but it does. But the other tragic part about this is that this story is not just our story. That same day, the same day that we got a phone call, so did another family. Mrs. Weir, your son has been in an accident. He only has minor injuries, but you need to come to the hospital. And Alice Weir and her husband go to the hospital, and a policeman meets them there and informs them that your son's going to be okay. He has very minor injuries, but you need to know that your son has been drinking, that he's tested well over twice the legal limit. You can actually take him home, but know that there was a boy that that was critically injured. A man critically injured in this accident. And we're not sure if he's going to survive the night. So we'll be in touch. Because if he isn't, if he dies, your son will be arrested and charged with vehicular manslaughter. So they went home that day. Mark Weir, bruised, a little sore, but that was it. And that afternoon, while he's watching the news, a report comes on television stating that a 26-year-old man had been killed at the corner of South Shepherd and Westheimer. And he screamed, and he cried. Too late, perhaps, but instinctively knowing that his life was never going to be the same. He was arrested. He was convicted. He spent 3 months in jail. He spent 3 years in probation. Some ask me, is that penalty enough? And I ask myself, how's Mark Weir different than me? If you're like me, I made stupid decisions when I was young. And that could have been me. That could have been me. Could it have been you? Mark would go on to finish college. But even after college, couldn't get a job. He had a record. And people wouldn't hire a felon. Amazingly, a few years later, my mom would develop a friendship with Mark Weir's mom. You see, we believe in a God that forgives and loves and heals brokenness. We don't understand him. We don't understand why these things happen. We get angry. But we place our faith in him, and he gives us peace, a peace that we can't comprehend. That day, 2 mothers became friends because they shared a bond, a tragic bond. Because on the same day, at the same precise moment, their lives changed. Mark Weir's mom would later tell us, embarrassingly, how grateful that her and her husband used to be that Mark and his friends didn't do drugs. They used to say, well, a little drinking wasn't the same as doing drugs. Our son wasn't a druggie. He just had a couple of drinks, and that was harmless. I wonder if I'm that naive today. Are you? Are you that naive about your kids? In July of this past summer, Sarah got married. Beautiful, beautiful young woman. Married a young man named Matt Broussard, who I'm so grateful for. Amazing young man, an amazing family. We've grown real close to them. She had an amazing wedding, beautiful, big wedding, lots of people, big church, gorgeous day, beautiful white dress. I walked her down the aisle. And on my left arm was Sarah, and draped across my arm was a neatly folded tie-dye shirt. And I walked her down the aisle. It was an honor. It was amazing to be a part of that. And when I gave her away, I turned and took the shirt and I draped it over the chair where her dad should have been sitting. Mark should have You should have been there. Who do you blame this on? Who do you blame this kind of a tragedy on? Do you blame it on a naive parents who thought it would be harmless for their kid to have a couple drinks? A dad that was trying to look cool in front of his kids' friends? A stupid bartender? A dumb choice by a kid who thought he was invincible? I pray that my story never becomes your story in any shape or form. And I guess I would just challenge you to make the choices today, to do whatever you can, to make sure that this story doesn't become